here and there and here and here and there and there and there and actually everything around. And just here where we stand, it was clear cut. Illegal logging is a major problem in Romania, not only in production forests, but even in the nature temples, the national parks. It's outrageous, and it's the perfect failure to see that illegal logging, even clear cuts, took place in national parks.
Entonces la lucha es que todos nos estamos luchando ahora para territorio, porque sin territorio no somos nadie. Bien claro tenemos nosotros como comunidad no vamos a dejar permitir que nuestro territorio nos quita los taladores ilegales.
Oh, they are taking so much timber from the forest. We just see them going to the forest, and you see we don't have the power to fight them. We don't have the power to fight them, so we just allow them to go and cut in timber. We have been protesting, but there's nothing. We don't have any power to fight them.
Throughout human history, the people that are closest to the forest have generally protected the forest. They use the forest, they interact with the forest, but they don't have an interest in seeing it totally cut down. That is the case today. The people that are dependent on the forest are also protecting the forest. The great tragedy has been that the global economy has just trampled over them and made their fight impossible. And that's what we're trying to change.
Illegal logging happens when the laws of the country of harvest are not obeyed. It could be cutting trees illegally from national parks, over-harvesting beyond the permit allowance, could be taken from territories of indigenous people or local communities where it's not allowed. There's also a lot of violence that occurs around the illegal timber trade. People are threatened. We have multiple cases where people have been murdered for standing up for their rights and for their community.
Well, a major driver of deforestation is the fact that if you cut down a forest illegally, if you steal a forest, there has been really up to now no consequence to that. You could simply make profit, you could take it anywhere to the world and sell it to you and me, and you would have no risk of actually getting in trouble. And that had to change. There had to, for the first time, be consequences for stealing the world's forest. Well, from our point of view, we really saw it in our investigations. We saw again and again, even when we started in the forest, we followed the crime and then we found the crime and then we followed the wood and saw where it went. We saw that it went to the United States, where most of the money was. And it eventually became clear. We had to break that connection. We had to have the end market say no to stolen wood.
The Lacey Act is one of our premier early pieces of conservation legislation that we have in the United States. It's been around for almost 125 years. What it did was really increase penalties for the sale or trade of wildlife species. A great example of the Lacey Act, and one of the things that it prohibited early on, was the importation of feathers for plumage, for hats. You had a huge number of populations of birds around the world that were being devastated because we in the United States wanted pretty hats. So that act actually prohibited that, and now we have a lot of those species that are on the road to recovery because of that act.
In 2008 in the United States, the government expanded the century-old Lacey Act to include plants, timber, wood products. And this made it the first law in the world, as crazy as it might sound, it made it the first law in the world that made it illegal to import and trade in illegally sourced or stolen timber.
The Lacey Act is working, and the reason it's working is that first it sent a signal around the world that it is no longer okay to trade stolen wood. You're going to have consequences. And people saw that right away, but then of course it had to show its teeth. It had to actually be enforced. And with each case that has occurred, you could see that signal spread throughout that sector, whether it was a music instrument sector. Gibson guitars was a major case that involved ebony from Madagascar. We now have known enforcement actions against wood coming out of the Amazon into the United States. We've had a case against the biggest flooring retailer in the United States using wood from the Russian Far East. And in each of those cases, you have a big signal going to all the companies in that region that it is no longer beneficial to build your business on illegal wood.
After the Lacey Act came into effect, that cut off what at the time was the largest consuming market in the world for timber and timber products. And shortly after Lacey, the EU passed a similar regulation 2 years later called the EU Timber Regulation that also bans the trade in illegally sourced timber. Australia came online after that. Why are these things important is because you make sure that the illegal timber is just not changing markets.
And the successful implementation of the Lacey Act has shown that it does not just protect the forests, it protects any business that has committed to using responsibly sourced wood. And I think that's why you see that the U.S. manufacturing sector has actually seen the benefit of this law and are now more and more supporting it.
A critical factor of the timber resource when we speak about it is people know that it's coming from not only is it sustainable, but it's legally harvested. Something like the Lacey Act helps with that because people start to say, well, hey, what does it mean to have legally sourced wood? And that's a good thing for the U.S. timber industry.
The Lacey Act, all that does is give everybody a level playing field to know that we're dealing with timber that's legally sourced. And so I'm 100% behind that.
What the success of the Lacey Act has made us see is that maybe the other drivers of deforestation need the same principle. But you've got soybeans around the world, you have oil palm, you have cattle that is often being planted on illegally cleared land, on land that has been taken from indigenous people. All the illegalities, all the crime that is behind the actual cutting down of trees is also behind the other decisions about how we use land around the world. So it is time to look at all the drivers of deforestation and ask the same question. Where is this from? How was it taken? What rights were destroyed in order to get this? What labor practices were trampled over? Nobody wants to be part of that. If we can bring this principle to the other drivers of deforestation, we actually have a chance to protect the world's forests.
Ya, la persona que compra de otros países, uno tiene que saber desde dónde viene la madera y ese es el mensaje que doy, que tenga mucho conocimiento, que lo que estamos haciendo como comunidad y como pueblo luchando por el medio ambiente no es para mí sola. Saber entender que el bosque también es muy importante, que como dice el bosque es que nos está dando vida. Sin bosque no estaríamos viviendo nadie ahorita en este planeta.